Then one morning, the word came to move out. Sergeant Dandy gave it to us. "Leave the guns behind," he said. "Take only your rifles and foul weather geared." He grinned. "We're being relieved." It was December 14th, 1942. We had been on the lines without relief since August 7th. My battalion, the 2nd Battalion, 1st Regiment, was the last of those in the 1st Marine Division to come out of the lines. Guadalcanal was over. We had won. And next they get pulled back off the island now, and he's climbing aboard the ship, aboard cargo nets. He's exhausted. I was able to reach the top of the net, but could go no further. I could not muster the strength to swing over the gunwale, and I hung there, breathing heavily. The ship's hot side swaying away from me in the swells, the very perdition lapping beneath me, until 2 sailors grabbed me under the armpits and pulled me over. I fell with a clatter among the others who had been so brought aboard, and I lay with my cheek pressed against the warm, grimy deck, my heart beating rapidly, not from this exercise, but from happiness. And he ends up having a sailor, a conversation, him and his buddy Chuckler, who's like one of his best friends. They end up having a conversation with one of the sailors. And he said, the soldier seemed surprised. He says, "You mean Guadalcanal?" A guy says, "Was it rough? How was it? Rough?" "Rough," we answered mechanically. Then Chuckler spoke up. "You mean Guadalcanal?" The soldier seemed surprised. Sorry, the conversation with the soldier that was on the ship that hadn't been to Guadalcanal. The soldier seemed surprised. "Of course I do." Chuckler hastened to explain. "I wasn't being wise. I meant, had you ever heard of the place before you got here?" His astonishment startled us. An idea was dawning. "You mean, hell yes. Guadalcanal, the 1st Marines. Everybody's heard of it. You guys are famous. You guys are heroes back home." We did not see him leave, for we had both looked away quickly, each embarrassed by the quick tears. They had not forgotten. And again, I kind of breezed through that part in the book. But a lot of times when they were in those moments of despair, they'd be thinking, no one knows what's going on here. They don't know how bad it is. But the reality was this war, or this battle that lasted 5 months. There was all kinds of reporting and the glory of the Marines and what they were doing. And so they were, I guess, they were just overwhelmed with the fact that this soldier had said, "You guys, are you kidding me? Guadalcanal, this is it." Now, after they leave Guadalcanal, they get some much needed R&R, rest and relaxation. They get to go to Australia to do this, and they go into the book. Of all the regiments, ours, the 1st, was in the most advantageous position for the great debauch. Discipline, already dissolved in the delicious squeals of the girls, all but disappeared that night. We'd received part of our 6 months' arrears of pay in Australian pounds, but we were issued no clothing. We still wore our disheveled dungarees. So you can imagine, these guys are coming off of Guadalcanal, hell, and now they're rolling into Australia. And they describe it here, the girls are waiting for them. These are the heroes of Guadalcanal. So they roll in and they get after it in the way that we talked about earlier. They start just, they're going crazy. And this is one of the things I loved about this book, is that Robert Leckie is so real. He's so real. He's just real. And guess what he likes to do? He likes to get after it. He goes out, he drinks, they drink, they chase women, he goes hard. And he ends up getting into some trouble. And he talks about brig rats, basically guys that have been thrown in the brig, which is the military jail. And on a ship, they actually have a little brig, a little jail room, and you can get thrown in there. And so he talks a little bit about that. It is most especially a marine sentiment, and when analyzed, it turns out to be not shameless or shocking, but merely this. A man who lands in the brig is apt to be a man of bold spirit and independent mind who must occasionally rebel against the harsh and unrelenting discipline of the camp. I am not attempting to exalt what should be condemned. I'm not suggesting that because of their boldness or independence, the brig rats be forgiven and escape punishment. Brigged they must be, and brigged they were. Nor am I speaking of the habitual brig rat, the steady maligner, the good-for-nothing, who is more often in the brig than out of it, and who seeks to avoid every consequence of his uniform, even fighting. I speak of the young, high-hearted soldier whose very nature is bound to bring him into conflict with military discipline and to land him, unless he is exceptionally lucky, in the brig. I speak of Chuckler and Chicken and Oak Stump and a dozen others. And, of course, of myself. So he's saying, look, you got guys that are high-spirited go-getters, and they're gonna get after it on the battlefield, and they're going to get after it on liberty, and sometimes they're going to get rolled up unless they're super lucky, and that doesn't make them bad people. And I had one of my buddies get in really big trouble. This is when we were young guys. Back in the day, one of my bros, he got in big trouble. And I thought that our officer, who's one of the best officers I ever worked for, I thought he was going to really, just crush him. And I thought he was going to be really disappointed in all these horrible things. And this is a guy, the officer was a guy that we all loved and wanted to always impress, and we wanted to do a good job for. And so when my buddy had this big incident that he did, which, he was drunk and got crazy and, got arrested and all that bad stuff. And I talked to our OIC about it. And I said, hey, sir, what's going to happen with my buddy? And the officer goes, hey, you guys are young warriors and things like this are going to happen. Don't let them happen much, but they're going to happen and we'll deal with it. And I was saying to myself, I wonder why I love this guy so much. But that's exactly it. He knew that you had young, rambunctious guys full of testosterone, and then you add alcohol into the equation, and you add chaos into the equation. Some guys might get in trouble. Again, I hate to give that credence to this type of stuff, because when I look back, I wish I would have been a better leader. I wish I would have been doing other things, But if you're in a leadership position and you got guys like this and you condemn them instead of trying to help them, you're not helping them. It goes back to this judgment thing that we talked about earlier. If I'm looking at you saying, oh, you got in trouble, you're a bad person, I don't want you on this team, instead of saying, hey, look, we got to get you under control, you got the right attitude, you got a lot of energy, let's focus it on somewhere correct, let's focus it on something good. Yeah. Let's get you doing something positive instead of doing something negative. Instead, sometimes guys go into the judgmental mode. I'm just going to judge you. And, you got in trouble, so you're bad. That's the wrong attitude to have. How about you got in trouble? How about me as the leader? I let you down. I didn't show you the right way to expend your energy. I didn't give you the opportunity to give you an outlet for this aggression that you have. Because aggression you're going to have, that means fighting. Yeah. You don't think you get a guys that are in the military. You want someone in your platoon? Do you want them to be not aggressive? Mm-hmm. Of course you want them. I want the most aggressive bastards you can imagine. And guess what? If you don't give them something to do with that aggression, they're going to find something to do with it, and it's not going to be good. Yeah. So as a leader, let's find something positive that they can do with their aggression.
Yeah, it's not like he's out there. Not like it's known. Like in your case. You thought he was going to get severely punished,
Right.
So it's like, it's not like he's out there publicly saying, hey, that's cool, do what you got to do, player.
You're right. But when it happened,
yeah, it's like,
And I think truly that officer, who is a great guy, he truly probably felt exactly what I just said. I should have given them a better outlet for this aggression. You know, I should have figured something better out for them to do. Yeah. We got to do something. You give us idle hands and pockets full of money. Can you imagine these guys are getting 6-month pay and rolling it? They were the richest guys in the world. I guarantee it.
Yep.
Especially rolling into wartime Australia. I mean, you know how stringent they were with the restricting the money that people were using and spending all over the world to save money for the war. And here come these guys in, richest guys ever, heroes of Guadalcanal.
Yep.
You think they're going to get after it? They're going to get after it.
Yeah.
So, as leaders, what we need to do is give them a proper outlet.
Right.
Because those guys want to get after it, but you got to give them the right way.
Yeah.
You know, you got to give them something positive that they can work on. Yeah. And if you're going to let them do something negative, then let's put some barriers around them so they don't get into trouble. Yeah. I wish I would have known this when I was coming up. I would have done more positive stuff instead of more negative stuff. So now we get into the trouble piece. And he's got so many great stories about what these guys were going through. And so they're out. He's out drinking, and one of his buddies, a guy that I mentioned before, his name is Chuckler. Chuckler's actually on duty. So he's standing duty, which means he's in uniform. He's not allowed to drink. He's watching, and he's being, he's on duty. Mm-hmm. And so here we go. I found Chuckler standing glumly outside the slop chute entrance. He'd hoped for the interior guard where he might sneak a beer or two. I'll get you one, I promised. I returned with a big glass out of which Chuckler might take a surreptitious sip. There were more Seidels until Chuckler said, I got to go to the head. Here, cover for me. He gave me his pistol belt and helmet and made off. So now, Leckie's drunk right now. Okay, so. But Chuckler says, hey, man, I got to take a piss. Here, take my helmet, take my pistol, cover for me. For a sentry to be drunk and then to desert his post and surrender his weapon is to combine cardinal sin with unforgivable offense. I was anxiously hoping that he would hurry back. But then, an unfortunate thing happened. Lieutenant Ivy League came striding down the corridor. I say it was unfortunate because Ivy League was the officer of the day. More than that, he was still the man who had filched my cigars, the enlisted men's cigars, if you will. So at one point, he had gotten a hold of some cigars, and this officer had taken them. And by the way, also, Robert Leckie, he's an Irishman, and I'm not going to, make a generalization. Yeah, oh, wait, yes, I am. Yeah. He's a hot-tempered Irishman. And so he sees this guy, and again, he's drunk. He just got off of Guadalcanal, and here's what happens. Back to the book. My anger was nourished by the alcohol within me, and I drew Chuckler's pistol and pointed at him and said, stop where you are, you lousy cigar-stealing son of a bitch, or I'll blow your gentleman's ass off. So, not good. No. And he ends up getting in pretty significant trouble. And he actually gets bread and water, which they still do that in the military. They get bread and water. He gets bread and water for 5 days. So in the break, bread and water for 5 days. That's the punishment that he gets. And he gets docked pay, and he gets busted down in rank. One time, I was on a ship, deployed, broken and dreary, and we were in a SEAL platoon. And I think I've told this story before. It was the one where the Marines, like, we would stay on the ship when we pulled into port, and it would take like an hour to get off the ship because everyone would be waiting in line. And so what we would do is we would just work out for that hour and a half, and then we'd go up. We could just walk right off the ship. Well, in that hour and a half, The Marine, this young Marine had gone off the ship and was getting carried back onto the ship like passed out drunk, covered in puke in an hour and a half. So that's what I think of when I think of these poor guys. Can you imagine coming off of Guadalcanal? You haven't even had water for 6 months. Never mind alcohol. It's a nightmare. But, and of course, they don't punish him too bad. Well, they punish him, but they got to keep him. You know, I mean, he's an able-bodied Marine. They're not gonna waste an able-bodied Marine. And hopefully, the colonel in the back of his mind was thinking to himself, you know what? I want this guy with me. You know, this guy that's just gonna. You stole cigars from me.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm gonna
threaten your life. Yeah, he's getting nuts.